Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at St. Swithin's Day, written by Grant Morrison and drawn by Paul Grist. This is a collection of a 4-part serial that appeared in Trident, which was an English anthology. They published it between 89 and 90, and as soon as it was done, they came out with this collection, added some color. I believe this is a new cover, and it's kind of interesting because at the time, Grant Morrison was already on his way to becoming pretty successful at DC. In 1989, he had just taken over Doom Patrol, and that was kind of the comic that really turned him into on his path, at least, to being a superstar. He had already done Animal Man. It was very like a cult favorite. But then Doom Patrol, people realized, whoa, he's doing some really interesting stuff. He was part of the British invasion, as they called it in the 80s. Did some comics for 2000 AD, like all those guys, and then DC snatched him up in the mid to late 80s. And of course, about his career, I imagine, since then. He's kind of one of the biggest writers in comics ever, as far as mainstream comics. But he did a lot of more independent stuff, and this was one of them. Nice cover by Paul Grist. If you don't know, guys, never heard of Paul Grist, he's most famous for his comics that he writes and draws. He had a long-running cop detective comic called Kane, and he also had a superhero comic called Jack Staff, and really good stuff. He's a great cartoonist. He has his style is kind of cartoony, and yet it's serious. Like, it's doing like serious stories, but it's got this like very light, cartoony style. The colors in this are by Steve Whitaker. So we open up with our protagonist. He's in a bookstore. He's shoplifting a copy of Catcher in the Rye and Rambo's poetry. And he walks out into the rain. He's in London. I like how the colors are kind of muted. It's not the best color choices I've ever seen. Like, some of that stuff is a little garish. But I do like it's on newsprint paper. And the colors are kind of muted. It fits the story better. So all the captions are this kid. His it's almost like diary entries. And but really it's just his first person narrative. And he's talking about how he stole these books so the experts would be chasing their tails next week, because he's plotting something very big and newsworthy. So he wants them to find these books on him, just so they'll be questioning and wondering, like, could this have led him to this? Yeah, even though he seems very depressed, he still makes little jokes like, Sylvester Stallone had Rambo 4, A Season in Hell. He's laughing to himself. So he's just kind of a very typical angst-filled, depressed teen. I hate being 19. I want to be 19 forever. He's walking around London looking at all the normal people, or as he sees them. And he says, sometimes I just want to scream. And all of a sudden, he's like the Black Canary. He's demolishing this whole street. But that's just in his head. We find out this guy lives in his head a lot. So he goes to visit this college. He's staking it out, basically. And he's talking about how in a few days, it's going to be St. Swithin's Day, July 15th. And Margaret Thatcher is coming to visit this college to give a speech or something. And then when nobody can see him, he pulls a gun out of his jacket. So he's planning to assassinate Margaret Thatcher. So he's on this train, and he's talking about how he doesn't like the new trains because you can't open the windows. You feel like a fish in a fishbowl. He liked the old trains when he was a kid. Excuse me. So he's visiting Winchester. Basically, he's killing time until St. Swithin's Day. Of course, he has the same thoughts about everyone in Winchester. They're all yuppies and they're all smug. And he feels like so less than, you know. He visits the Winchester Cathedral. He says, I hate the rain. Everything bad happens in the rain. I want to die here. I'm hungry. So he's just very typical teenager. He's in this little cafe and he's fantasizing about this pretty blonde who's sitting by herself, imagining their whole relationship and how one day they'll both laugh about how depressed and alone he felt when, he was younger. And then this woman all of a sudden sits down next to him. And she says, you're so antisocial. And he does another little wry witticism. He says, I'm not antisocial. Society's anti-me. And she says, are you still going through with it then? So she knows about his plan. And he tells her the whole plan. And then as the camera pulls back, we realize just another imaginary incident in his head. This woman isn't there. And then to top it off, when he turns around, the pretty blonde girl, turns out she has a male friend. And not that he had a chance anyway, but he's just like, of course, typical. I like this night scene, the way it's drawn and colored. So basically, he doesn't want to pay for a hotel room. He spends the night in a maintenance train car, listening to his Walkman, listening to the radio. So now the next day, he's back in London. And he's kind of fantasizing about the reaction his plot will get. And he imagines that all over the country there'll be parties in the streets. Ding dong, the Wicked Witch is dead. I just hope it doesn't rain. If you guys don't know about Maggie Thatcher, she was a pretty unliked prime minister. I mean, if you were like some rich cunt, you'd love her. I mean, she was just made life really bad for like 90% of British people. Cut a lot of programs. It's the standard of living went down for your average person, but a few rich people got really rich. And so just from listening to punk lyrics and reading British comics, it just seems like she was a big party pooper and made England shitty for like a whole decade. So he goes to call his mom. His mom is just like, why are you in London? What's going on? You were supposed to go to that job interview tomorrow. You better be there. Just giving him shit. And he's like, Mom, I just want to talk to you. I got something important to say. But she keeps like being a mom, And then the operator says, you need to put in more change. And he doesn't have it. So his phone call gets cut off. I imagine he wants to tell his mom he loves her or something, because he knows he's probably going to die tomorrow, or at least end up in jail for the rest of his life. He decides to shit can the whole book thing, throws the books in the river along with the Walkman. As he throws in Rambo's complete works, he says, well, I wouldn't want them to think I was queer anyway. Then again, maybe I am. Just show like how confused this guy is. He's basically a good kid. Like all the money he has left, he donates to the Blue Cross. He throws it in one of their little boxes. And then he goes to visit the graveyard where his dad is buried. And also the grave of Karl Marx happens to be there as well. And he starts thinking about the song There She Goes. And I assume he's talking about that Sunday song. There she goes again. I think that's what he's talking about. And he just, without even having the music, he starts dancing to it. And almost joyously, he's saying, I'm going to die and I don't care. I'm going to die. So today's the day. It's St. Swithin's Day. He's shaving in a bathroom, and then he takes out a pen, and he writes "Neurotic Boy Outsider" on his forehead. So outside the college, there's all these protesters. And wouldn't you know it, of course, it's raining. He says, I knew it would rain. I feel drained. I thought I'd be all charged up, but I just feel drained. I can still walk away. I don't have to do it. I want out. I just want to be happy instead of this. I want to meet girls and be normal. I've got to do something. So Margaret Thatcher arrives. She gets out of the limo. He's thinking to himself, I can't move. But then all of a sudden he feels this hot wire in his stomach and his chest, roaring in his ears. And he slowly makes his way across the street. And he goes right up to Maggie Thatcher. And he reaches in his jacket. And he sees her face. She looks a little scared. And he pulls out his fingers and goes bang with a big smile on his face. And of course, instantly he's tackled by all these guys. I like how he just thinks, now I've done it. So they break his tooth and he's like, this hurts like hell. But he says, still worth it. It was worth it. It was worth it just to see her scared. I guess that's, that would feel pretty good. And then we see some time has passed. So I guess I imagine there's no crime against going up to a prime minister and pointing fingers at her and saying bang, so he's released. And we see him on one of those old-timey trains. And he says, I like trains. Have I said that before? And it almost seems like the whole incident was very cathartic for him because he seems different. He's saying all the church bells are ringing all at once in one great big beautiful noise. And the sun's on my face and the window's open. And I don't care if it rains. I really don't care at all. Oh man, when I was like in my early 20s reading this really hit me. It was very relatable to me. Because even though I wasn't a teenager anymore, I still was just as bad as one. I was totally full of self-loathing and felt like a freak and guilt and shit and hated myself, So, yeah, there weren't many comics like this, I mean, there weren't that many comics that weren't about guys punching each other. Sure, I knew about Love and Rockets and that stuff was moving, and there was a handful, but just one specifically, just about this middle-class tosser, or whatever you want to call it, a middle-class loser. And I kind of liked it. I still do, actually. It's a little embarrassing. I didn't keep a diary ever, but I imagine if I had to reread my diary entries from that time in my life, I'd be mortified. I'd be so embarrassed. What a dummy I was. But Grant Morrison has said in interviews that a lot of these captions were actually taken from his diaries, his teenage diaries. He obviously wrote other stuff. But I mean, that's why it feels kind of real, A lot of teenagers feel that way. It's kind of sad, though. And kind of dumb. Because most people I know aren't that happy. But, living in North America, Europe, in the late 20th century, early 21st century, if you're at least middle class, or even just living month to month, it's way better than a lot of people have it. And throughout history have had it. I came up with a word, it's called sucksist, and it was made by combining subsist and exist. Because I think that's what most of our lives like. Most of us, our lives aren't nearly as great as we hoped they'd be. I don't think many people, can say that their life is better than they ever imagined. They're living some great fantasy life. But at the end of the day, we live better than 99% of all humans who have ever existed in history. When you think about it, I mean, I'm poor as fuck. I'm a dishwasher. I live month to month. If I break my finger, I'm probably going to be homeless in a month or two. But I still have the money to go to Safeway and buy ding-dongs and Ben & Jerry's ice cream. King Louis never ate a ding-dong. He never ate Ben & Jerry's. He couldn't go to the all-you-can-eat sushi buffet once a week. And you know what else? He couldn't listen to music. He could hire some musicians, but recorded music, even the poorest people, we got that. It's amazing. So many things about living now, but most people aren't that happy. I don't think humans are ever going to be happy. So I think this comic is just this kid. It sounds like he's from a middle-class household. He's pretty good looking. He's not some freak, but he still wants to kill himself, basically. And a lot of people feel that way. It's sad. So there you go. Enough of my rambling and prattling on. But St. Swithin's Day by Morrison and Paul Grist. I don't know if they ever reprinted this. I have no idea. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.